Ocean Hills at its best is when we are in it together.
The Starbucks barista heard me this morning, "Mom, Mom, she's the bomb." So I liked this video because it was funny, first of all, but even more so, I felt like it was a pretty accurate portrayal of a truth we all know, which is that parenting is hard work. And that though sometimes it's fun and exciting and incredibly rewarding, it also is lonely and hard sometimes, and it takes an incredible amount of self-sacrifice. So I thought it was a good way to frame our conversation today, which is about self-care. And I think parents, but especially moms, tend to exert so much time and energy into raising little ones that there's sometimes nothing left. And so today we're going to talk about self-care, like I said, but also why self-care matters. Why is it important? And I joked earlier about praying in regards to what I would want you to hear today. And in all seriousness, I think what I really want the takeaway to be is that your needs matter. And they matter deeply. They matter just as much as your children's needs. They matter as much as your husband's needs. And they're incredibly important. So my hope is that as you leave feeling excited and encouraged and inspired and revitalized, because this isn't about another thing on your to-do list or another thing to add to your already busy schedule. It's really about becoming the healthiest and whole version of yourself that you were created to be. And self-care is a huge part of that. So, again, time and time, research actually indicates and shows that the two best gifts you can give your children are investing in your marriage and investing in yourself. And so with that being said, we are going to dive into what that looks like. But first and foremost, for me, when I hear people speak, a lot of times I hold on to the stories or the images or the word pictures that are given. And so I wanted to share with you guys a word picture that has worked for me around this idea. And so when I think about parenting, I think about sometimes kids in relationship as like seeds. And as moms and as parents, your job and your intention and your effort is exerted to help these seeds grow into healthy, whole, happy little flowers that are sprouting up. And so because of that, a lot of time is spent looking at the environment that these seeds are planted in, making sure there's fertile soil, that children have the opportunity to receive a great education and extracurricular activities. And so as parents, you pour into these seeds and you plant them and do all that you can to nurture and to grow them, which is incredibly significant and important. But what I sometimes have observed and that I know to be true is you go to take your pot to water these seeds, and there's just nothing left. There's nothing left in the pot. And as we all know, without water, it's really difficult for seeds to become all that they can be. So that's a word picture, or a way of thinking about the importance of what we're talking about. Giving your children all that they need to grow, but even more so for you. This is a time for you, and I think the very fact that you're here in this room is a way to provide self-care for yourself. So I'm excited to be here, and hold on to this image because I think it will help frame what we're talking about today. So this board behind me, I hope you all can see it. It says, how do you care for yourself emotionally, spiritually, physically, and relationally, and why does it matter? And so those are some 4 domains that we'll talk more specifically about. I really appreciate practical, sometimes input and advice and thoughts, and so because of that, we're going to dive into 4 very practical domains of self-care today. But to start us off, on your table, you should see a little 4-part thing that has a watering picture on the front of it and those 4 domains. We are going to do a quick 1-minute self-assessment. So this is not something that you'll be required to share in front of the group. Don't worry. For your own self, in the quietness of your own mind, do a little self-assessment and draw a line on that watering pot, indicating where you think you might be as far as being filled up in those areas. How filled up are you spiritually, emotionally, physically, and relationally? Just a little line. Does everyone have their lines? So you can be thinking about that as we go forward, but I just wanted a moment of self-reflection. We are going to jump into the emotional component of self-care. And when God created us, he said, "It is good." In the beginning, in the creation account, he said, "It is good." In fact, he said, "It is very good." And the Greek word that is used is tov, which means good, but it also has a functional implication, which the word means it is functioning or working the way it should be. So when we were created, God declared it is good, tov, we are functioning in the way that we should be. Well, I wish I always felt that. I wish that I always felt that I was healthy and whole and completely functioning in the ways that I should be. But that's not always the case for me, and I'm guessing that may not always be the case for you. And it turns out that sometimes hurt and brokenness manifests itself in this emotional domain. That sometimes when we feel broken or things have happened to us, it's the emotional domain where we experience this the most. And so self-care is looking a bit deeper into our emotional worlds and being able to ask ourselves difficult questions that maybe we haven't had the courage to ask. Maybe it's noticing things about ourselves and gaining insight about our own emotions and why we act the way that we do. So as we know, we experience all kinds of emotions, some positive, some negative. We experience excitement and joy and happiness and contentment. We experience anxiety and depression and anger and being overwhelmed and all of those things as well. And so emotions tell us something about ourselves, about others, and about the world. And these are really helpful things to observe and to know, and they often give us really helpful information. The other week I was on an elevator going up to a tall building, and I stepped off and kind of looked down and saw the height that I had been up, and I experienced this wave of just that fear of heights. And that was helpful for me. I think it's important as humans that we have these emotions that indicate, it was very safe, but it indicates a potential danger. But based on background and how we're wired and family experience and upbringing, people have varying levels of trust in the accuracy of these emotions to tell us the truth about ourselves, about our world, and about experiences. So I want to try to bring this home with an example. Maybe a young girl who grows up in a home where dad is frequently late coming home because maybe he's drinking or he's out with other women. That woman, when she grows up, and maybe is in the context of a new marriage relationship, she may respond differently to her own husband coming home late than might someone else. Or someone who is in a really scary car accident might respond differently to a family road trip than another person may. And so those are some examples of how our past experiences shape our current emotional responses. And I think part of self-care is being willing to take a look at those things that evoke responses in us and just be observant, be scientists of our own lives, and ask questions about why those emotions may be there, be they positive or negative. So what did our families tell us about emotion? Were some emotions okay and some not growing up? How was anger manifest? Was there room for anger to be expressed in healthy ways? Another interesting point is I think for some people there's this numbing or desire to run away from uncomfortable emotions. I think that's very normal. But one thing we've learned from research and science is that you can't selectively numb emotion. So the degree to which you try to numb emotions that are unpleasant, like anxiety or anger, you're also numbing joy and pain and the richness that life has to offer. So it's an encouragement to be willing to look at both so that you can experience those highs of life too, because you cannot just numb some and not the other. It's an all around the board numbing that happens. So I want to share with you a chart that I use sometimes in my private practice that has been really helpful, and it's around emotions, because the truth is it's really difficult to speak about emotions in isolation. As we know, emotions also affect a lot of different areas of our life. So we have the feelings on this side. Physiology is over here. Physiology relates to your body's physical response to the emotions that you're experiencing. So in the case of anger, the physiology might be a beating heart or clenched fists or feeling flushed. That would be how your body is physically responding to the emotion that you're experiencing. And then we have thoughts and behavior on this other axis. And the reason this has been so significant and helpful to me, and I hope to you, is that as we're exploring feelings and physiology, it's helpful to sometimes know that this axis right here, the physiology and feelings axis, is so difficult to control or intervene because it happens so quickly to us. So imagine if you're driving with your child and you get cut off on the highway. What sort of an emotional response? You might experience anger very rapidly and the associated physiology with that, and there's no time to really intervene. It happens to us, like my elevator experience. It happens to us, which is sort of rough news, but the reason I share this is because there's some very positive news with that, which is that we actually have a tremendous amount of control when it comes to our thoughts and our behavior. So if there is a point of intervention, it would be along this axis here, the thoughts and behavior axis. So I'm going to give another example to help bring this point home. This is used a lot with when you want to create behavior change or you want to try to manage feelings in a healthy way. There could be a trigger that happens externally that triggers an emotional response. That word trigger, if you think about it, it's pretty accurate because it implies a very quick motion that simulates these sorts of feelings. But again, thoughts and behavior are where the intervention happens. So for instance, I'm going to share personally, I have a terrible fear of public speaking. And so last night I was preparing for this and I was experiencing my heart was beating. Even last night, I was feeling very nervous. And I guarantee that if one of you came to me in kindness and said, Jen, stop feeling nervous. Like, you're going to be fine. Just stop feeling nervous. Stop that beating heart. You're going to be just fine. I guarantee that probably wouldn't work so well. So for me, I have learned to control my thoughts. So instead of letting myself ruminate about how badly things could go or how I could fall off this bench or how I could be looking at this chart and noticing a word spelled horribly wrong, things like that, I practice different thoughts. In addition, I know when I have nervous energy, it helps me to get up and move. And so if you guys can picture, I had my own private dance party to Pandora last night in my room. And it turns out that it helps with anxiety. So that's just an example, but this applies to all emotions you may be experiencing that are difficult or hard, that you can exercise control in some different domains. So think about that as we continue to talk and recognize that feelings are so important. The other image I'm going to leave you with is that of a raft. There's a proverb that says, not in the Bible, but I think it's a Chinese proverb. It says, if you're crossing a river, a raft is helpful. But when you've crossed the river, leave the raft. You may be saying, great, Jen, that's deep. But the way that it works is sometimes we learn these ways of relating and we experiencing these emotions that are actually very helpful for us as kids. So as kids, growing up, we need to cross that river in our family systems or in our past experiences. What we learn about emotions and how we relate serve a very significant purpose. However, our current experiences or where we're living now, the people we're in relationship with now, may require or be calling forth from you a different way of relating and maybe you're toting around a raft because it was useful at one time and perhaps it's not anymore. So just important things to think about when it comes to emotions and self-care, asking some hard questions. So as far as action steps, I'm going to try to be practical as far as action steps with some of these. So examining your emotional life might be an action step. You may have more power and control than you think. Asking hard questions, examining your triggers and your current way that you think and respond to those triggers. And maybe practicing, just like building a new muscle, practicing new ways of thinking about your circumstances and responding to your circumstances and your behavior. Addressing wounds, which is really sometimes hard and painful and not fun work at all. But again, numbing that pain and trying to just cope and get by, you sacrifice richness and joy and some of the positive characteristics and experiences in life as well. Learning to name and express emotions in a healthy way and seeking support. So along these lines at your table, I put a handout that I've used with kids before, but I think it relates to all of us. It's just examples of ways that people manage stress. And you could substitute different words for stress, anxiety, depression. These are just healthy coping strategies. They're healthy behaviors. And I hope that you could add some of your own, but they're just examples, ways to get you thinking about self-care. So next is spiritual. So we're going to dive into spiritual self-care. Spiritual, let me just throw out some words when I think of spiritual. It's connecting with God, but it's also reconnecting with the deepest parts of yourself, your spirit, your values, your purpose, your priorities, something bigger than yourself and beyond your everyday ways of kind of getting by and coping. It's taking a step back and reconnecting with God, essentially. And it's asking yourself questions like, are you focusing on what really matters? Are your choices reflecting your deeper values? So maybe self-care in this area means engaging in a community of faith, getting out in nature. For a lot of people, that is what will help connect them. It could mean worship. It could mean solitude, prayer. It's funny, the Santa Barbara Independent had an article recently that Gail showed me that was about self-care. It's called Me Time. So I was obviously I saw it and was very excited because I thought it related perfectly to what we're talking about here. And it shares different stories about how locals choose to take care of themselves. So I'm just going to share a few quotes. Miss Mitchell says, it's often in nature or on a hike. At these places inspire deep and reflective thinking, such as the retreat center, or wherever you feel connected to yourself, that you can find that peace that comes when you step away from all the noise. It's good to stop and ask yourself and think about what really restores, what really helps me to hit the reset button. Another man said, this was kind of funny, he has 3 kids. He says, it's important for me to get out of always trying to do what everyone else thinks needs to get done and kind of pursue what I think makes me happy. Making me happy is being at a soccer game with a bunch of 10-year-old kids. And then this last quote, which is how I think it ties into this spiritual component. When you carve out the time to refresh and restore your equilibrium, you'll be better at your job, better as a parent, and you'll be a better partner. And that word equilibrium stood out to me when it comes to spiritual renewal, because I think sometimes that spiritual component can do the most for us, for balancing us out and helping us find our true north and reestablishing the equilibrium. And I want to share with you a practical exercise that a mentor taught me one time that she does to focus on this area, and she calls it the summit exercise. And at first I was picturing her kind of climbing a mountain, and that's actually not what happens. It's called the summit exercise, and she does it consistently every week on a Sunday night. And the reason it's called the summit is because she separates herself and goes to a place that's quiet. She actually goes with her computer because that's where she keeps her calendar. And she does it as a way to look down on her life from a new perspective. So it's about perspective, and for her it's about very practical scheduling issues. So she looks at her week and she filters her decisions through her values and her priorities. So she comes up and she says, I value this, this, and this, and I value these things so much that I'm going to choose how I schedule my week. I'm going to choose to say no to things and say yes to things based on my value. And every week she sees the importance of summiting her own life and seeing it from a new perspective. And then so when she goes down to do her week, she's doing it with an intentionality that she wouldn't have had otherwise. So I thought it takes a lot of discipline, it takes good boundaries, but for her in her life, she decided that if she didn't do that, she would be just getting by and may look back with some regrets about how she's chosen to live her life. It's hard. Also along these lines, June Michelson, many of us know June. She is helpful in being very realistic in saying, this is so hard. I will acknowledge this kind of thing, this self-care, it's great theoretically, but when you try to practically implement it, it's very hard. And so someone asked June, how do you grow yourself spiritually when there's just no time? I don't have time to do my Bible study in the morning or to sit and pray or to be in nature for an hour. And she used the phrase, nibble, not feast. So where you may want to feast, you may want to sit down for an extended period of time, that maybe it's a nibble. Maybe it's little nibbles throughout the day during nap time, or when you're going to the bathroom, or when you have a moment to yourself, maybe when you're cooking. It's a nibbling, not a feast, which may be more practical, for some of you right now. So next is physical, and this to me is pretty straightforward. It's giving your body what it needs. And I think as moms, you're very gifted in intuiting and knowing what your children need, and are so determined and dedicated to giving your child all that he or she needs. But are we as good at doing that for ourselves? Do you give your body what it needs and care for your body in the same way you care for your little one? And why would your needs be any less important than those that you're trying to take care of? So it really comes down to carving out time for rest and sleep and exercise and healthy eating. It's stress management. You wouldn't believe how stress can impact your body in ways it's called somatically. So a lot of people, I've had people come to my office who have been cleared by doctor after doctor for medical issues, when really what it boils down to is stress, and then some stress management techniques are what are needed to help alleviate the physical symptoms they're experiencing. So just this idea of caring for yourself physically, seeing yourself as a whole person, and that what you do physically impacts your emotions and your spirit and your relationships. So what is this for you? What does it look like for you to care physically for your body and do it well? What is your body telling you that it needs? It may very well be rest. But again, it impacts every other area of your life, and it's incredibly significant. So the last is relational health, relational well-being, and this is a big one. I'm going to speak honestly and directly because I believe that we are created for community, and I believe that when things aren't going well relationally, it has the potential to impact our lives perhaps more than many other areas, at least for me personally. So relationship with yourself, relationship with your husband or your spouse, relationships with friends, family, and community. So we're not designed to do this journey alone. In fact, I think especially that's true with parenting. We need each other. We need support. And it's interesting, I love these kinds of gatherings. I get very excited when a bunch of women are together in a room. It's like I want to initiate a big group hug or something. I won't do that right now. But it's because I feel that we can understand each other and relate to each other in ways that we can't even with our closest men in our lives. There's something about women and shared experience that's so powerful. So the first aspect of this that I want to talk about is simply peer relationships. And I'm going to share, I know a lot of you are familiar with Shauna Niequist, but she has these great images and analogies or words that really help me. And so she wrote a chapter in her book called Bittersweet, and it is a chapter called Home Team. And some of you may be familiar with this idea, but it's called the Home Team. And she talks about these people in her life that she has decided are on her home team and what that means to her. And because her words are far more creative and funny than mine, I'm just going to read a little excerpt. She says, "Lately, I've been working hard on my commitment to the home team. Everybody has a home team. It's the people you call when you get a flat tire or when something terrible happens. It's the people who, near or far, know everything that's wrong with you and love you anyway. The home team people are the ones you can text with 5 minutes notice saying, 'I'm on my way and I'm bringing tacos.' There are 2 reasons you need to know who your home team is. First, you need to know who they are because they need you. These are the people you visit in the hospital no matter what. These are the people whose weddings you attend no matter how far the destination or what terrible thing they've chosen for you to wear. These are the ones who tell you their secrets, who get themselves a glass of water without asking when they're at your home. These are the people who cry when you cry. They are your people, your middle of the night, no matter what people. The second reason you need to know who your home team is because then you know who your home team is not. Everyone else is not. You may be tempted to have about 100 close friends and relatives on your home team." And she goes on. I don't want to continue because she's really good and I'll keep reading. But that last part is significant too. It's deciding who is on your home team, but then also making the difficult decisions and sometimes sensitive decisions about who is not. And not to be exclusive, but to be intentional about who you're investing in, to be intentional about who you're letting in and being close to and doing life with. So this idea of a home team is something that I want to leave you with in the relational health category, just to think about who those people are and what choices you're making as far as how you spend your time and who you're investing in. Who walks this journey with you? Marriage, so relationship to your spouse. I wrote down that marriage isn't, and this is a quote from someone else, marriage is an unconditional commitment to an imperfect person. And I think sometimes something about having children can sometimes heighten that imperfect person part or increase frustrations maybe. And also something about children can bring up old hurts in fresh new ways as you're raising children. Maybe you find yourself reacting or behaving in ways that aren't helpful. I talked about hurt when it came to emotional health, but relational health is one area where those hurts often manifest themselves too. Your relationship with yourself, your spouse, your family, and your community, and your world. So again, this idea that when things aren't going well relationally, at least in my own life, it impacts me more than any other area. And so I just want to speak honestly about marriage and about how important it is to be willing to ask hard questions, be willing to fight for intimacy when it feels so vulnerable and when it feels perhaps hopeless even. I remember John Ireland speaking one time about these questions, this sort of weekly check-in that he once heard from a mentor. And the questions that he would ask are, is there anything I did that hurt or offended you this week? How can I love you well this week? So sometimes fighting for intimacy means being vulnerable and asking some pretty sensitive, hard questions. Maybe it's having the courage to bridge a rift that has gotten bigger and bigger. And it means kind of going and facing each other and trying to fix that. And again, not easy, but it's this relational health component, and it is amazing how powerful it can be to experience that sort of an intimacy and what that does for the relational health component. And on the flip side, how painful it can be when that is broken or hurting or not as healthy as it could be. One of the examples that I give is like if someone came to the ER with a cut on their arm, and how a doctor very well could, you know, put a Band-Aid on it and send the person home, but that wouldn't be a responsible decision. The responsible decision would be to go in with the scrub and the antiseptic and get in there and scrub it. And of course that's painful, and of course we don't want that, but that will enable you to throw a Band-Aid on it, to go home and to have a healthy scar, but a wound that will heal and have a functioning arm as opposed to infection that grows that no Band-Aid in the end will be able to really fix. And so sometimes that can be an image for relationships, be they friendships or family with our families of origin or with our current spouse. Sometimes a little bit of scrubbing is in order, and we don't want it, and I don't want it. And at the same time, it can be very powerful and healing. Let's see, families. Gail Clay gave a good suggestion for intimacy with families. Sometimes it's very practical. Sometimes it means sitting down with your family at the end of the day and having a tradition where you have dinner and talk about highs and lows, and you implement traditions that cultivate intimacy and that have the opportunity to bring up hard things and good things, and so that your children know that all of those are welcome. So those are the primary points as far as relational health. A lot of takeaways or action steps could be possible, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But I want to reference bittersweet again as we sort of head into the conclusion here, because I can't do it all, and I am assuming you can't either. Try to do it all and do it all well. In fact, Shauna Nyquist talks about this idea, like, especially as women, that we feel as if we need to do everything, first of all, and then do everything well, which is really an impossibility. So sometimes doing more, I again don't want this to be another addition to your already full plate, but a liberating, freedom, exciting time of thinking about what you need to do to take care of you. So I'm going to read this interesting point here is sometimes it is easier to figure out what you value and what you want your life to be about than it is to figure out what you're going to give up in order to make that happen. So maybe for you, leaving today, the first step is figuring out what you're going to give up to make these things a priority, to make yourself and to value yourself and your own health. So Shauna, again, she has this chapter called Things I Don't Do, which is awesome. And she was talking about how she's a list maker, and so she used to make to-do lists. And she said now, and before I make my to-do list, I make a list of things I don't do. And she has it on her fridge, a list of things she doesn't do. She writes, I love the illusion of being able to do it all, and I'm fascinated with people who seem to do that, who have challenging careers and beautiful homes and vibrant minds and well-tended abs. Throw in polite children and a garden, and I'm coming over for lessons. But she had lunch with this lady in her life named Denise, and she said, this is what Denise told me. She said, it's not hard to decide what you want your life to be about. What's hard, she said, is figuring out what you're willing to give up in order to do the things you really care about. She said those words have been rattling inside her for years now, twisting around, whispering, taking shape. And she goes on to say that this list, I'm going to read a couple of things because they're pretty funny. She says, things I don't do. I don't garden. I don't do major home improvement projects or scour flea markets and antique shops for the perfect home accessories. I don't change clothes just because I'm leaving the house. I wear yoga pants 99% of the time. I don't make our bed in the morning, standing firm on the adolescent belief that there's no sense in doing something you're just going to undo at the end of the day. Scrapbooking and photo album making are both on the list, although I do take a lot of pictures. I only blow dry my hair on special occasions. I don't spend time with people who routinely make me feel less than I am. So I might encourage, as part of this conversation, I think it's fair and important to acknowledge that we not try to do it all. We just try to do it smarter and do it with intention and say no to things that maybe aren't life-giving in the ways that other things might be. So with that being said, I would love for us to be able to leave with some action steps or takeaway items. So perhaps I'm going to just throw out some suggestions, and then I'm going to get personal and tell you what mine are. So maybe it's building a home team or investing in the one you have. Maybe it's seeing a counselor to heal a relationship or address wounds. Maybe it's establishing a weekly or every other week date night, putting a line item in your budget for babysitting, committing to exercise, prayer, quiet time in nature, church, or worship. Maybe it's trying the summit exercise and seeing how it works for you. You know you best. And so at the end, we have some cards that will create action steps. But going back to our little word picture here, I spent some time reflecting myself on those things that fill me up and realizing that for me it may be different from other people. But for me, I love mornings. I happen to be a morning person. And so I have tried to get up and spend 15 minutes before I go to work without any set agenda or expectation, but just to kind of focus and be quiet. I like journaling and writing. So sometimes I write a little bit. Sometimes I just read a devotion, or sometimes I'm quiet. But it's a time of focus before I go to work in the morning. So that's something that I do. I love beach volleyball. I love being outside. I don't like running. And so for me, my joy is setting aside time on the weekends to play beach volleyball, to be outside. So that's something that definitely fills me up. I have a group of women in this community. We meet in the mornings because it's the only time that works in our schedule. There are 5 of us, and we share about life. We think about ideas. We talk about struggles. We sometimes cry. We sometimes laugh. We drink coffee, which definitely fills me up. Let's see, I like learning. I realized for me, I've learned that I really appreciate learning new things. That's important to me, and so I set aside time to read or to listen in the car when I'm driving to podcasts or different ideas, and so that's a part of my self-care. So these are examples just for me personally, and I'm excited to hear what might come out of your conversations about what fills you up. But again, just to remind us of the importance, because this is what I can pour out from. If I didn't invest in pouring in this, I wouldn't have anything to give out to my clients, to my family, to my friends. So it's a visual reminder. If we want to help people grow, if we want to be the best versions of ourselves, we need to figure out how to make decisions that will enable us to have all that we need to do that. So again, there are action steps. Cards for action steps. There's a wealth of knowledge here in this room. There are women who have discovered things that work for them, practical things. And so as you pass around cards at your table, I'm going to ask a couple things. One that you think about a takeaway. Think about something that might help you be the best version of yourself. And again, maybe that's taking something away from your schedule. And then I'm just going to give you a few minutes to think about that. And then I might welcome some sharing, just some brief sharing from people to pass on to the group, maybe something that you have done in the past that works, or that you're committing to or wanting to do for the future that you think will help you. So a few minutes, and then I have a quick concluding thought after that. So you're writing down, sorry if I wasn't clear, you're writing down some things, some action steps for you. I would say just 1 to 2. Don't be overwhelming. 1 to 2 action steps moving forward, and then we'll do some sharing. So before I conclude with a last quick thought, I was wondering if there would be anyone who is willing to share with the group either something that you've put on your action step card or something that has been working that you plan to continue, a way that you take care of yourself. Could be big or small. Erin.
This one came to me just this week. I have a 2-month-old, so I don't usually do my hair. And I started having dreams. In my dreams, I was doing my hair. And so I woke up in the morning. That's how bad I got. I was craving that feeling of just feeling pretty again. So I woke up in the morning and I did my hair, and I felt amazing. And I think I shared this with Amber. And I mean, I'll be honest, I don't wash my hair every day. And when I straighten it, I get to keep it like this for a couple days. So I decided this week that that's something I'm going to do. Whenever I get a chance to shower and wash my hair, I'm actually going to take the time to do my hair because it makes me feel good. And that way when my husband comes home, I don't feel ugly and gross.
Yeah.
There's something about doing my hair. I'm not a big makeup person, but I am. I like doing my hair. So.
Love that. I love that.
So even if I don't get dressed, at least my hair is done.
So great. Thank you. What about others? Any other thoughts? Or self-care?
Mine was perspective this summer.
Hmm.
Looking at things differently. Because there's always times when you're just feeling as a mom where you're stressed out or, I'm not a good parent today. But if you looked at it from the summit, you could say, well, wait a second, this child's not dead, so he's got to be good.
Doing something right. Yeah. Yeah. Perspective.
One action step might be to pay attention to when you overexpress emotion and why you do that.
Yeah. Noticing yourself and your emotions, and I think giving yourself grace in that too. I think for a lot of us that it's hard sometimes we're hard on ourselves, but when those emotions do come up, giving grace and just observing and learning and growing emotionally. Well, we're going to talk more about this in the tables, but this was really sort of what I wanted to share. And it's really back to my original question. It's, why is self-care so important? Why does it matter? And yes, it matters for your kids. Yes, it matters for your spouse and for you. But ultimately, it matters because you matter. And I think that's what the takeaway, what I want you to hear, is that you matter so much to God. Your hurts matter, your joys, your passions, your skill set, your dreams, all of that, they matter so much to God. And He ultimately is our Father who loves us and wants to parent us, but we need to join Him in that effort. We need to allow ourselves to be loved and cared for, and to assert and to lavish the same sort of care that we extend to so many others to ourselves, because we are precious and we are beloved and we are dear women and we matter. And so if that's the only thing that you take away, just remember that and how important it is to love yourself well. So.